Hmm.
Good evening, and welcome to another Horrific Chat. This is another one of our topical discussions where we highlight issues that affect both horror creators and fans. Today I'm joined by my panel, Dale and Carlos, and we're going to be looking into the phenomenon of sensitivity and its compatibility with the horror genre. Just to give you a bit of a preface, I did some research so that at least we're coming from an informed perspective. A highly sensitive person is categorized as an individual who perceives and processes sensory information at an intense level. They tend to demonstrate heightened empathy and have an aversion to conflict and violence. They're also more likely to become overwhelmed when overstimulated or stressed. The term highly sensitive person was first phrased by Ian Aron in 2013, and it's believed that highly sensitive people make up between 15 to 20% of the world population. A highly sensitive person is not considered to have a mental disorder, but rather a personality trait. Recently, we've got individuals and organized groups that have been calling for words, phrases, and scenarios commonly used in the horror genre to be altered or removed to accommodate these folks. And this is what we'll tend to delve into tonight. In addition to everyone on stream, those in live chat are welcome to join in with any questions or thought they have on this subject. So, first and foremost, Dale and Carlos, thank you very much for joining me tonight. Great to have you. Oh, and
Thank you for
we
having us on.
have Andrew. Apologies, that's nicely timed.
How is everyone? Sorry I'm late.
Grant literally just started, so
Good.
great to have you. Yeah, we're having to do a wee bit of technical stuff going on, so we're like going through Skype. But that's the wee bit of table tennis with the internet because it's always fun. I just gave the premise there of what we're talking about tonight and what the term of a highly sensitive person is classed by, where the term came from, and basically that because it's better to come in, at least have a look in who are we talking about and why they're affected and basically where we need to go from there. So, as always, let's have a discussion. Keep it friendly. We're not going to fall out with each other over anything. It's not worth it. More problems in the world and all that good stuff. But I suppose the first talking point is there seems to be a perception now that highly sensitive people are congregating with more regularity in the horror genre. Where does that perception come from? And would this not be the genre that most people that would consider themselves sensitive would avoid? Should we do anti-clockwise or what way is best?
However you want.
Go anti-clockwise. Go Dale, Andrew, Carlos, back again, and then we'll see what your thoughts are. Sound good? Dale, you're up.
Well, so okay. I think to an extent, horror actually draws a lot of sensitive people because I think there's something cathartic about reading a lot of horror materials. If I know, for example, that I grew up with a good bit of anxiety, and I always felt actually that it was a really healthy release of the anxiety, that you make yourself a bit anxious while reading. It's kind of similar to the way people let out emotions like anger through death metal music and stuff like that. By simulating the experience in a safe and controlled environment, it also allows you to control the emotion a little bit. So that would be my biggest take on it, is I think there is a draw for people who may actually have sensitivities or vulnerabilities to certain triggers because it actually is practical, I think, as a device for them.
Oh, cool. Who wants to jump on next?
So, just following up on what Andrew said, I am diagnosed with anxiety, and when I was a little kid, I was always a very lonely, bullied kid. I kind of lived in my house by myself. I had my friends, but I was pretty much I grew up kind of very sheltered, very protected from the world, to put it that way. So for me, reading and watching horror was, as Andrew was saying, something very cathartic. For me, it was taking all of those things that I was afraid of and putting them in a controlled space where I could be scared, but that I knew that those things couldn't directly harm me. So I could read about violent, scary, traumatizing things in a way that would help me let out all of those emotions but just in the safety of my room with a book, not actually going out to seek, horrible, violent things to happen to me or to do them myself, but just, safe in the comfort of my room. And I think that highly sensitive people tend to go for horror because it makes us feel that all of those emotions, it helps us let them out and kind of release them. It's kind of like when people say like, oh, I need to have a good cry, and you finally have a good cry and you feel so much better. Same thing with a horror book.
Yeah. Del?
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Horror for me is cathartic. I also suffer from some mental illnesses as well. And what I've found is that horror, it gives me like a safe place where I can join my light side and my dark side together, if you know what I mean. I mean, I just don't get, and I understand how people don't want to watch horror or read horror, but I think people are misinterpreting the reasons why we watch it. We're not watching it because we're psychopaths. We're watching it because it gives us as much joy as, say, a comedy would to a normie. I get the same exact emotions. It also helps me to, because I'm really quite highly sensitive when it comes to, say, an example would be animals dying in movies or in books. I find that really depressing, whereas other people might not see that as depressing for them. I like the idea that it is a safe place. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, 100%.
Yeah, I get that myself. Just I don't know. My background is I've always enjoyed horror. Like I grew up in a rough neighborhood during a rough time in the world. I used to get a melt knocked out of me, like primary school up to the beginning of secondary school, till I sort of learned to take care of myself. But being able, and you're always told you weren't meant to fight back, you were meant to forgive and all this kind of stuff, and it was really frustrating because you're like, well, they're doing it, but I'm not allowed to, sort of thing. So me jumping into horror always gave me a chance to, okay, I get to, vent or watch precariously through others, especially revenge stories and that, always like those, because that was always a case of, right, somebody's got it, and then you could get it out of your system. I've always had a dark sense of humor, which does not play well in the normal world. And there's nowhere else apart from horror I can get to enjoy that. I have real gallows humor, and people look at you as if there's something wrong with you, the properly, that over dramatic sort of stuff. And yeah, if it wasn't for the horror genre, I wouldn't be able to like let it out. I wouldn't have that catharsis. I wouldn't then be able to adjust myself to take part in the world. And sorry, Carlos, you're about to add something there?
Yeah, and the one thing that Dell said was this idea of just because we enjoy horror and reading all of these things doesn't mean we're a psychopath. It's just part of us letting out, having this catharsis with the content. And if you look at it, most, if not all, literary genres are basically that. They're a level of escapism. Like if you're reading a romance book, and you're a person that loves romance, you're reading romance because in your current life, you can't have those types of relationships with this beautiful person that came out of nowhere and took you away into a castle and whatever, and you want to experience that. People want to fall in love with a vampire who sparkles in the sunlight for some reason, and
sorry. As the screen just goes.
Excuse me, do not pick on my Edward. Leave him without
fight.
Or I'll get very angry.
But see, this is kind of like the situation that for me, a vampire is something like out of, let's say, Stephen King's Salem's Lot. That for me is a vampire. Edward not a vampire, some other supernatural creature that you're totally free to fall in love with. I don't think you would fall in love with one of the vampires in Salem's Lot. And I think that level of escapism is what makes reading fun. And it applies to pretty much every genre. Like if you're reading The Lord of the Rings, there's this thing that takes you away to another world. You want to experience the Shire and the elf cities or towns or whatever you call them. I forgot the name. But there's that, and horror is no different. It's a level of escapism, except it's you're afraid of something, you want to experience something, you want to experience it in a way that is not going to hurt you or hurt somebody else. There's a book.
Yeah, and once again, the title of horror itself, it doesn't, it doesn't beat about it. You know what you're get. So it seems to be that there's people surprised. Like we've talked about this in another discussion, where people will actually join a horror group while not enjoying the horror genre. And there's a whole strange mindset there that makes absolutely no sense to me. I'm not going to join a romance group and then complain about romance being in it. It just doesn't make sense. If I join a comedy group and don't find it funny, I'm not going to say, oh, this shouldn't exist. I'm just going to, that's not for me, and move on. But it's either being done deliberately, or the people not understand the word horror. Like what's going on? Why all of a sudden we're getting an amplification of?
Oh, there's a couple of ways to account for that. First off, you can't rule out and out trolling. There is definitely going to be the subcategory of people who are simply, hopping into those groups just to start poking at people because they assume that, there is going to be a volatility in a group like that. And just a great example. I am a fan of fantasy, and right now the Wheel of Time show is out in season 2, and of course I don't know if you know anything about it, but it's been a fairly controversial production among its fan base because it's really, really different than the books. And I understand people not liking an adaptation for not being faithful, but there's this entire group of people who deliberately joins every single fan group and pokes and insults every single person that they see say anything positive, and that's like their entire definition for being. So there is that entire category, but there's also going to be some people who also are curious about the people involved, and their goal for being there is that they want to understand what the allure is. It's kind of like everybody is having this conversation, and you hear it, and it's kind of gibberish to you. It's kind of like if you meet walk into a room full of people talking medicine or talking computers, you're not in those fields. It might sound just like complete nonsense to you, like gibberish. And so maybe you do want to know why people are interested in this. Why is somebody going to watch every single true crime serial killer show that comes on to Netflix? Why is somebody going to be the first in line to buy? And I actually love these authors as I say them, but Duncan Ralston's Womb or Aaron Beauregard Playground. Who are the people who are lining up for these books? I could see somebody having sort of a sociological interest who wants to know what makes people work in tech.
Yeah, that's fair enough, having an interest, but why? Let's leave the trolls aside, because they just stir it up anyway. And the best thing is to recognize a troll, I think. And if you know someone's trying to wind you up, don't give them what they want. It's like taking part, don't join in the online comments. Don't bite. Because the minute you do, they've won because they've got what they want from you. But what about these other one? Maybe come from outside, and they're like, "This all needs to change." Yet we've already established, I think, just even from a small group, that if you're a psychopath anyway, you don't feel anything, so you're not going to get anything out of. You're not going to watch movies or what. There's something not right up there. I'm no psychiatrist, but I know that much, that if somebody's on the psychotic level, they're not going to get. That's when they become harmful anyway, because they can't get satisfaction from art or normal stimuli, and that's where it goes wrong, which horror explores, of course.
Yeah.
If you, for example, one thing I tell everybody is, I can read or write the most violent scene you have ever seen, and I won't bat an eye. I would just be thrilled by it, like regardless of how gory, how horrifying, how anything. But show me somebody having a cut like here or anywhere in their body and it starts bleeding, I'll probably die. That's the thing. I mean, it's in fiction, it's something that I can deal with. In real life, if I see blood or violence or everything, I'll be the first one to faint. So that's the thing. That's what people don't understand. There's that separation between the fiction and the real world. And to what Andrew was saying, I think there's an expectation that if you go into a certain group to familiarize yourself with it, that you should approach it with a level of respect, because you don't know that group. So one of the things, we were discussing before this is, I am gay. I don't normally go to gay bars, but I mean, if I did, and there's a gay bar, and then a straight person goes in, and the first thing they do is start name calling people at the gay bar, insulting them, calling them derogative words. Oh, that person is probably gonna leave there with like 4 black eyes. Yes, I know they only have 2, but but
push the eyes in the other sockets just to give them another dig. That's weird, because that would be completely like, that would never happen in real life. You'd have to be moronic. And I'd probably be more gay bars than you then if you don't go, because I was loads of mates and that was all the thing. You just went, and I've never seen a case of somebody going, well, I'm going to, because it would be stupid. Is this where the internet gives? Is this where people's brains break down with the internet?
The anonymity.
Do we also have to separate between the internet and real life?
Yeah.
Where
I think there's another side to it when we start looking at internet elements. It's really, really important, though. So coming back to the gay bar example, one thing that's really crucial about that is how we orient ourselves towards the spaces that surround us. So in that gay bar example, you have left your home. You have deliberately driven or walked to a specific location. You've entered that location voluntarily. And so each of those steps creates a sense of physical distance between you and the space that you think of as your space. The internet is a little bit different, because literally wherever you are is where it is. And so if you're in your home, all of a sudden, these people, the people who are joining these groups, maybe it is, innocent just to check it out. They're kind of curious. But then all of a sudden, they see this conversation that they find deeply upsetting. They opened the can of worms and was like, holy shit, it's full of worms. And at the same time, though, they're sitting in the comfort of their living room. They're sitting on their bed with their feet propped up. They're at their kitchen where they have, dinner with their kids and stuff like that. That's a much different feeling for them. And it's going to stem a much more abrupt knee-jerk reaction where suddenly they're more deeply offended by what they're seeing. And then the problem essentially becomes that once people start getting that sense of indignation, invasion, affront, they dig in their heels and then they push. So even though they can close down the screen at any time, participation in an internet group is 100% voluntary. They can bow out. Now that it's in their living room, they feel like they have some sort of obligation to combat it out of their living room. That would be my hypothesis on
that's it. Actually an interesting one.
And that's the important thing. Sorry, just to go to that, like the big difference that you touched on is that screen that protects you when you're online. And in the example of the gay bar, you're physically in that place. So if you offend people physically, they're probably gonna kick your ass. But if you're at the comfort of your home, behind that screen with anonymity, with just a username, not even your real name, you can say whatever. And no matter how many people come at you, they're not going to physically harm you. So you feel protected to just keep going and going and going and going. And I think that's the problem, that people enter spaces that belong, let's say in this case, going back to horror spaces, without that level of seeking understanding or seeking to respect the space they're going into. They're just going in there like, okay, I'm going to check this out. Oh, this person said something I don't like. Blah, 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 blah. And then if they actually say something back, as you said, they just dig down their heels and they go like, I'm not changing my point of view. I'm going to double down on this because I'm protected.
Yeah, which is I don't know.
What I find in my group, my Horror Central group, is that I actually get quite a lot of religious people coming on, trying to change my ways, if you know what I mean. It's like they think that people who are into horror have no religious faith at all, and it's quite comical some of the things they come up with. But it's just like, dude, if you don't want to be in my group, just go away. You can't change 2,000 people's minds by one post.
Yeah,
you know, just go away.
This podcast alone, we've had all sorts, and I don't tick boxes or anything, but just have conversations with people, and talk to people. What a mad idea, I know, but people obviously discuss their backgrounds and that, and loosely about what they're, you get a sense of what somebody's about. So they paint everybody with the one brush, and I don't like that aspect with horror fans as well, that you're expected to wear a uniform of a horror fan. You got these basic people who, if you don't have all the fierce piercings, you don't have all the tattoos, you don't wear all black all the time, then you're not a horror fan. You're like, mate, grow up. I mean? It's such a wide-ranging group of people from all backgrounds and interests. In addition to being a horror fan, like, to try and pigeonhole people just doesn't work. That's why I don't get this whole nonsense that's coming in now. I've been trying to fight back against it for a couple of years now, because it's the wrong crowd to be starting in the first place. And this is part of these discussions, because I think they're trying to do it through the back door, because they've nothing else in their lives. They just want to poke, they just want to antagonize.
Yep. Yeah.
There's another
I don't
interesting...
get it. I don't get it.
Well, there's another interesting angle to it as well, though, that Dell kind of raises, which is, thinking about religious readers of horror. It's worth noting that there are subgenres of horror that overlap considerably with traditional religious mythologies. And so, we mentioned the vampire mythos, of course. And, that's a very classic demonic, satanic pact. It's portrayed in a lot of the vampire stories as very classic black and white, good versus evil. And so that draws a group of readers that that fits what they're looking for in horror. And that in and of itself is, it's great. I mean, anybody can be, believe what they want, anybody can be interested in whatever stories they want. But then let's say they read a vampire story or demon possession story that really gets their interest, and suddenly they're like, okay, let's join some horror groups so I can talk about these kinds of stories. And so it starts out like that, and then suddenly though they find themselves side by side with people who are having very rational, reasonable conversations about very different categories of horror that don't mesh or blend with a very particular set of worldviews. Now all of a sudden they feel like they're defending a space that they have every right to be a part of, that it fits a reading interest of theirs. And then they also see this problematic niche within it that they also want to push out. There's a lot of different ways, because I mean, if our core central question is, where do these tensions come from? There are a lot of different avenues that it's going to be entering from. It's hard to it's hard to look at it as aggressors and people who are just kind of having horror conversations. It's really several different forces that are all jamming together in the same doorway.
Are people less able to have conversations these days? Is that part of the issue?
I think so. I think people right now don't like to talk things out and find a common ground, and that people don't like to have a conversation to try to learn or teach something. They just want to voice what they want to voice. Like if for example, I'm also an anime fan, and right now there's this whole conversation going on about Attack on Titan and the ending of Attack on Titan. That
what's going on bloody get past season 2. That disappeared into the ether. So I got season 1, got into season 2, and then it just. I'm like, what the hell where'd this go?
The thing is, because as of the end
as in distribution wise, I physically can't get to watch season 3.
What happened is that at the end of season 3, and I'm not going to spoil things here in case anybody watches this that hasn't read the whole thing, but as of the end of season 3, they finally reveal what's behind the whole thing, and it's something nobody could have expected. And it goes from just being this action anime of people fighting titans, and it actually becomes this real, how would I say, like historical speech on hate and how people react to hate and how you can perpetuate hate forever, you know. And it's really, really, really violent, and it's really, really messy. But what happened now, the conversation is regarding the actions of the protagonist near the end. And the conversation goes whether the protagonist became the villain or if the protagonist is still the hero. And the problem is that people online now don't want to have that conversation. They're just like, this is the way I see it. This is the way you see it, and you are wrong. And I'm not going to have any conversation about it. I'm not going to listen to any reasoning about it. This is just how I feel. This is the truth, and you are objectively wrong. So people don't like to have conversations, even about things that are very complex that maybe don't have a black or white answer.
If it can't be a slogan, it can't be talked about.
Yeah, but that's something I try to get. I try not to jump on bandwagons and stuff with these type of discussions because I hate it, you know, and I hate that. I hate the word debate, as you know. I like discourse, I like discussion, because we can't get to the bottom of things, or we can't find a way forward unless we do. But sorry, Dale, you were saying?
What I find is that I find it really hard to explain to people my passion and my love for horror, because it's like you're butting heads, you know. Somebody who doesn't watch horror doesn't understand why we do it, and then when they want to know why I like it and I go and explain it, I can't explain it well enough because I'm getting met with force, you know, with lots of, oh well, you know, that doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense why you're laughing at that scene, and it's a tough one. It's a tough one to have a discussion with a person who's not into it, you know.
Yeah, but that's like anything.
I'm finding it quite hard.
There's a lot of comedies out there I do not laugh at, and people are like falling off their chairs, and I'm just going, you know, completely blank. Don't get it. But I'm not for 1 minute, and this is where the difference is.
What I don't get is,
yeah. Sorry.
You know what? I watch some comedy stand up. I used to, but I mean, it's so derogatory. You know, they're allowed to go and trash people in wheelchairs and trash, you know, the gay people and furries or what the hell ever. They can do whatever they want. But why are people picking on horror? When in actual fact, there's other genres out there that are way worse than what we are doing, you know, what we are writing, what we're reading, and what we're watching, and what we absorb ourselves in. There's just one I watched a few weeks ago from Matt Rife, and I mean, it's really funny, but really, yeah, it's hilarious. But at the end of the day, it's actually quite derogatory, you know, and I just don't get why people are picking on the horror genre, which is a horror, and not just leaving other genres out. You know, it's just like, I mean, the news for one thing is way worse than watching a horror sometimes. You know, true crime stuff like that. We see it everywhere. I don't get it.
Do you think it's back to when people realize the sort of person that actually is either a horror creator or a horror fan? Well, I think you have to be both anyway. You can't be a horror creator without being a fan, or else it doesn't work. Same with any genre. You have to be invested, or else it's going to show if you're just trying to dial it in. But do you think people twig on maybe very quickly that potentially horror fans are easy targets? Oh dear.
So I had
tumbleweeds are just going across the... No, but honestly,
I think it has to do. It has to do with this thing about what's weird and scary for other people is usually an easy target. And as you were mentioning before, so not all horror fans look the same.
True.
Like we have all of these people who have horror channels that, as you were saying, like dressed in black, tattoos, piercings, like the dark eyeshadow, and every single horror movie and paraphernalia in the background. That's what they picture. So they go like, "Oh, this person is a weirdo," and maybe that's the nicest person in the entire universe. But for them, it's like, "Oh, this person is a weirdo." So because that person is not what you would normally see on your day-to-day life, it becomes the easy target for people to go after. So even though I wouldn't normally say horror fans are an easy target, I can see where, as a group, some people might see us as an easy target.
Well, something else as well. I think there's an extent to which horror, and this comes back to something you said earlier, Carlos, about the way people have a tendency to conflate the imagined versus the real. When you look at the things that are imagined in horror, there are things that have been universally viewed as scary, frightening, problematic. Murders, dismemberments, all sorts of violence. Those have always been kind of the bedrock upon which horror is built. Grief and loss, and the other powerful negative emotions. Then you look at something like comedy, and one thing that's always struck me is I was born in '79, so I kind of grew up semi-aware during the '80s and really moving into the '90s, and when I kind of really started noticing things around me. But going back and watching some of the comedies from the '80s, there's a certain cruelty to a lot of those comedies, but the thing is, the things that they're cruel about were acceptable at the times. And so, you get things like gay bashing and trans bashing. You get things like, overt racism. You get, jokes about sexual assault. I mean, and, now if that was in a comedy, it wouldn't work. In some cases, obviously there's going to be the exceptions, but at the time of those comedies, though, nobody batted an eye about things like sexual assault jokes, or especially LGBTQ issues. And horror, though, it's always been those foundational elements that have been the elements of horror: monsters, demons, murder, violence. And so I think that also has made it seem more like ubiquitously bad, that people who like horror like these things that have always been bad. Whereas somebody who's laughing at a risque comedy, they're just, they're laughing at a line being crossed. That's the reframing of it, because comedy's always been this place where we deal with kind of the more horrible side of society in a way.
That's the thing as well. It's never trivialized in horror. That's the whole point. In horror, when you deal with something that's brought out, it's never the positive aspect, because it's the negative aspect is always brought out. So if you're seeing racism, for example, you're seeing brutal racism, and that's the whole point, to make you go, "Oh, that's not good." That's to give you that reaction. Nobody's going, "Ha ha ha! Oh yeah," it's not. It's done with purpose and for a reason.
And the thing is, if I'm writing, let's say, for example, a book about a serial killer. If I'm writing a book about a serial killer, I can't have my serial killer all of a sudden be very considerate about the people that he's killing. Maybe that's his, pathology, but in general, it's probably going to be somebody that's going to be killing all sorts of people.
They've built the profile. They know what their victim's going to be. And and then their mind, to have to justify it themselves. How many serial killer movies have I watched where the victim, it looks as if they're just about to talk them around, and then the killer snaps, because then they're readjusting their cogs because they want the kill.
Yeah,
but we know that we are not fucking stupid. It's this infantilization, of talking to people as if they're stupid and can't. Back to what Andrew's saying, this discernment between fantasy and reality. We know the difference. Because if we didn't, there'd be absolute chaos out there. There's a reason why we live in a civilized society.
I think what people don't want is to understand. I mean, people want it easy. people want the easy explanation. They just want like, oh, is this killer a racist? No. Okay, then why did he kill a person of color? And you're like, well, because he kills all sorts of people.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them happened to be a person of color. Oh no, that makes him a racist. No, it makes him just a killer. And one of those people happened to be that. It's so if you're writing a book in which your villain is let's say a racist, you can't expect that person not to act as a racist in the book or in the series, because that's the character.
Yeah, and that's
and it doesn't mean that the person that wrote the book or wrote the movie is a racist. They're writing a character that is a racist and is behaving as such.
And does the killer in the book or movie get lauded and praised and get away with it? 9 times out of 10 they don't. You know what I mean? That's all. It's the eternal battle again between good and evil. You know, it's what we all boil down to, is that's not right. And you can't make an interesting protagonist or antagonist if you don't have some building blocks and flavor. You know what I mean? If you just make them two-dimensional, which is what's happening now, you're getting all these 2D wooden planks going about, you know, both in writing and on screen, just non-interesting entities bumping against each other, and it's boring as hell. And then you're not getting into the mind of, why did they do this? And I don't like true crime. I don't get it.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I'm not ever going to say to somebody, don't you watch that or don't you read about it? You know what I mean? It's madness.
It's valid not to like it. It's valid not to like it, and it's valid to like it. You might have your reasons why you relate to that sort of work, and it's valid too. And I don't know why suddenly it became a bad thing to like true crime. It is interesting, and particularly I think for me as an author, it helps me understand the mindset of a person who would be a killer, so that when I write that into a book, I'm being faithful to that. Because what I keep saying over and over is, what I owe my reader is honesty. I don't owe them coddling.
Yeah. So I just got a question in the chat here.
You just see my search history. Oh my god.
Yeah. Sorry, we've got a question in the chat here from Chris. Which modern day horror movie was the worst example of too much sensitivity, do you think? So I suppose the question is, there's people trying to get everything changed. Has there been an example of it actually happening? I'm trying to think, because if a movie like bores me to tears, I'm not going to usually finish it. If it's just a...
Oh God, I
tricky one. That
should have an answer.
What about Evil Down the Street?
Yeah, that was.
What about Evil Down the Street?
That was super sanitized.
It might have been a little bit...
Yeah, that movie was super sanitized. I got no sense of dread throughout it whatsoever. Obviously,
I haven't watched
plug
it.
my reviews on the channel, folks. We're going through the whole thing. Leaving aside the other issues, the story just did not engage with me, because it was just, there was nothing there. I got no sense of danger to the family, the husband, the wife, anyone around them circles. There was no sense of, and it was supposed to be a demonic possession. I got no sense of danger to the priest, who randomly turned up and said a few words twice. You know, there was nothing there.
That's a clear example. Yeah. Not that I'm trashing the movie, but I'm not going to do that. But yeah, I would say that would probably be the latest one I've watched that's been sanitized.
Yeah, and you get nothing from it.
Or maybe they didn't have the funds to.
But you don't need funds to create a sense of dread or a sense of danger. This is no,
you're right.
It's an excuse that's been parried about budget. You know, when we talk about movies, or I don't know so much in books, because it's a completely different beast. You know, but always with movies, it's always budget. Budget's the excuse for everything. But you don't need that. I watched another short from Taylor. There was only 2 actors, you know, for most of it, and there was a sense of dread and tension because there was character acting taking place. It's the same when I read it.
Yes.
In fact, I'll not show it, but there's an anthology I read, and it was just every buzzword you can think of. And it was supposed to be a horror series, and I got no sense of dread. And all there were just these bland characters, not doing anything, but they threw in a few words here, and then I'm just like, third or fourth story in, I just gave up, put the book away. I'm like, I'm bored to tears. And if that's what they're looking for, nah, it doesn't work.
I guess for me, there's one, but it's a series, not a movie. So I loved Bates Motel as a series. I actually loved it very much because I really love the character of Norman Bates in Psycho. So Bates Motel, I really enjoyed it through the whole thing until they did Psycho. Until they got to the point in the story in which they actually did Psycho. Because they didn't kill Marion Crane. That's her name, right?
Yeah.
They didn't kill the character. Instead, they flipped it around and they killed her, her a-hole boyfriend. That's the way they did it, and she just escaped. And for me, it was going so well. I mean, after that, everything goes back to being very good. But for me, the one part that they shouldn't
the most iconic scene of horror.
Exactly. The most iconic part. I guess somebody said, well, I don't think it looks so good if he's killing a woman in the shower dressed as a woman. That might be a problem.
Once again, this is the infantilization. It's just, that's his character. He's not a good character. He's not being lauded or praised.
No, he's and in fact, throughout the whole series, even though it does try to create a sense of empathy toward Norman because, he has issues, you're pretty clear on the fact that he's messed up.
And that's the point.
That's the point. That's why the movie was called Psycho. That's why he's a killer. You're not supposed to empathize with him. What he's doing is objectively horrible. But in the series, it doesn't look good for him to kill Marion Crane, so she escapes.
Let the right one in.
For me, that series was great. I loved it, and Vera Farmiga as Mother, amazing. But for me, that was the one big miss, and it was because of sanitizing.
Yep. Let the Right Run In, the TV series. God, that was terrible. I mean, they took, and both we did a discussion obviously on the remake and the original versus the book. They are truly disturbing tales. I mean, it covers everything. You've got serial killers, you've got pedophilia, you've got, it's every gnarly aspect. You've got vampires, and it's all done the way. It's, it makes you cringe. The actual story itself makes you, I would not like to meet any of these characters in the real world. And that's why you enjoy it, because you're like, thankfully I'm not going to meet these characters in the real world, but that's your catharsis. But that TV show, it was so bland, sanitized, safe. And it was just, what are you doing?
Sorry, I didn't actually catch the name of.
Let the Right One In.
Oh, okay, got it. Yeah.
Yeah, they did a TV series of it, and
they did.
Why? Don't do it. Honestly, don't do it to yourself. Go. Actually, do you know what? Go bang your head off a brick wall about 10 times. It'd be less painful than watching the series. I did it so you don't have to.
Oh, see, here's the other thing though. That
yes, we reviewed that.
There's a problem that comes with some of the stuff we're talking about here, and don't get me wrong, it easily could be sanitization, right? I can definitely see how we can talk about it and say that's why this happened. So using Psycho as an example, though, there's two other problems going on here. That part is where it overlaps into remake territory, and perhaps more importantly, unnecessary remake territory, kind of like Let the Right One In, which I don't even understand why they would need to do more with that. But so that's going to be a second problem that's coinciding here, right? They've sanitized an element. They're also creating a remake of something that really was kind of ideal as it was. But then also, I could just as easily picture a bunch of studio executives saying, you know what? everybody's expecting this character to die, so we need to shock them in a different way. So let's and here's the wonderful genre term, or medium term of let's subvert expectations. And
mate, you've already said problematic twice, and I'm cringing. Please don't say that as well. I'm going to end up disappearing under here and cringe.
I mean, just look at the last season of Game of Thrones. That's exactly 8 episodes of subverting expectations.
Exactly. And I mean, that's literally the term they kept tossing out while they were talking about it too. And there's I don't know if we can call it director's commentary, because I don't think there was any real direction or idea behind it. It was just nonsense. But no. So put another way, though, there's this really odd line between what is sanitized and what's just bad writing. What is dull, lifeless, and uninteresting writing. You have to wonder whether or not that piece would have worked if they put that scene in there. It might have been equally bland and tepid because of a weak execution. Something slips there. I've seen a lot of pieces that, on the one hand, actually a great example. I saw Disney's Strange World, which, of course, is one of the centers of woke controversy, because they specifically included a gay young protagonist as a feature of the film, even though it's really tangential to the main plot. And basically, it became one of those things that fell under the rallying cry of go woke, go broke, or whatever. But
that's because people are tired of being preached to.
But the truth is, though, it was a mediocre movie that if you watch it, the plot is interesting. You can see why they made it. The concept was kind of cool, but the execution fails on numerous levels, where the writing is just not bad. It's not fully thought out. They didn't flesh out the idea entirely. And, basically it's a piece that the problem is that, any one problem in a story can usually be overcome. Multiple things have to go wrong for something to truly fall flat. So, in a case like the Bates Motel, I think it's a convergence of several problems occurring at once, and that's really the thing that ejects us out of these pieces.
Yeah,
it was one of my questions actually I had, which this kind of ties into. So, I was asking, is something more insidious going on with highly sensitive people being weaponized or used in some manner by other interested parties? Now, there's nothing more aggressive than the grifter. I think we all know that. The grifter who's out to con people, no talent of their own. They are the most hateful people when they're backed into a corner or they think they're going to lose it. So we've seen this happen with other genres, and it's, like I said, it's a veneer. If it wasn't woke, it'll be something else. We've seen it over the ages, either being religion or something else. It'll be a new term in 10 years' time. It's the same people. And we've seen this happen to other franchises. They're just burned to the ground because they're just disgust. People in general are quite reasonable. It's the mob is the dangerous thing. And people just end up being disgusted because A, it's crap, B, they're being preached to and spoken to like morons.
So
my concern is this coming into the horror genre, because we're seeing it. They're remaking over stuff that was better before. They're remaking it with bland stuff, and then they're using this veneer of, well, we're being nice, we're being sensitive, we're being considerate, and it's just for grifters who wouldn't make it on their own coming in.
So I think, and I'm sorry, I will say the word you don't like, but
Andy's already said it twice.
So, at a risk of sounding problematic, because I don't want to get in trouble for what I'm saying here, I just want to be clear with what I'm saying. So, as I said, I'm Hispanic and I'm gay, and for me, seeing Hispanic people, seeing gay people, trans people being featured in media is very important. It's something that makes me feel included. I'm the kind of person that when I was watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer and they started giving these tiny little hints that Willow might actually be realizing she's gay, I was the kind of person that was there every week like, oh, look, she said this thing. Oh, look, she did this thing. Oh, so when the reveal came, I was like, yes, But if you look at that, it was something earned. It was part of the character's development, part of the character's growth, so it felt natural. What's happening now is that they are putting, let's say, the queer person or the POC front and center as the hook for the story. And the problem is that if anything is wrong with the production, with the movie, with the series, there, that poor actor or actress is going to be the focus of all the hate. You know, if the issue was that the soundtrack was crap, people are going to say, oh well, they put this person as the protagonist. If the writing was crap, oh, they put this person as the protagonist. Or if somebody actually says, well, the soundtrack was crap, then people will say, oh, this person is racist, or this person is homophobic, or, you know, it's just not the right way to do it.
Into silliness, and that's part of the problem. The whole conversation has devolved into silliness.
Yep. It just becomes this thing about picking the one thing, putting one thing forward out of the production, so that any complaint around that production becomes that. Like, so I'll bring it up.
They're even preempting the post before even the thing's released, and you're just kind of like, really, you're expecting failure.
Like I'll put something there, like the Little Mermaid, and I'll say it this way. I think Haley Bailey, I think that's her name, the person that played Ariel, she's beautiful. And from the moment I saw her, I was like, oh, I think if they were going to do this, she does look the part. That's awesome. But there's another subset of the internet that's like, oh no, they're race swapping the Little Mermaid. So then the movie came out, and the issue wasn't with her as the Little Mermaid. It was a bunch of other stuff with the production, like the writing, the plot holes, the added music that didn't make sense.
The remake that didn't need to happen. The fact that it's Disney, a scumbag company that needs to die.
But if you complain about it, people will turn it around and say you're complaining about Haley Bailey as Ariel, and that's not it. From the moment she came out as the Little Mermaid, I was like, oh my God, she's beautiful. And then the movie came out, and if I say, oh God, I hate this new song that they did, why did they do this? Oh, he's complaining because of Ariel. No, I'm not. In fact, I said, I think she's beautiful and she fits the role.
Back to what I'm saying, this has happened in all these other genres, and these genres are burnt to the ground. Just because the companies are at large, they're not seeing it yet, but we're starting to see it now, right? Yeah. I'm concerned about, I don't give a toss about other genres. They can do whatever they want. I care about horror. That's the genre I love. That's the genre that inspires me. That's the genre I do not want to see devolve into this nonsense.
So I got to toss this in there as a response to that in a way, which is that I think the core problem, this is kind of why we keep jumping to other genres and other things, is that this is what conversation is devolving into. It's not just horror that, I mean, it doesn't matter where you go, politics, education, business. I mean, everything is, devolving into name calling, where, slogan chanting, where you automatically assume that everything the other person says is driven by some sort of secret or hidden agenda. Coming back to the Wheel of Time example, anybody who says something positive about the show, immediately people are saying, you're being paid by Amazon. You're being paid by Amazon. And people are just like, no, I like the show. Come on. But I mean, there is this assumption that there is a nefarious force behind somebody who disagrees with you, and it's pervading all of conversation, all branches of it. And so it's definitely affecting horror. Absolutely. But yeah, I think it's almost hard to break that, horror off on its own, because I think there's a much more fundamental issue that's showing up in these really, really noxious and nasty ways.
Yeah, and that's where we need to have the conversation. That's where we need to highlight it and push back so we don't devolve, because horror has kept the cinema doors open over last year. You know what I mean? There's horror movies, the ones making profits, not losing 300 odd million at a go. There's last night I went to see The Nun 2, and I was joking with Carlos because the way the seats were, I was asleep for most of it because it was just and there's these wee girls actually going, "Woo, ha, ha," and I'm like, oh, this chair just buzzing me in the right direction, and it's leaning back, and I'm like, I'm out. that might be more to do with me, not being extreme enough. But we'll have they tried it in horror and it's failed. I'll give the Hellraiser continuation, the 2021. They tried to bring, if you don't like this movie, you're an xenophobe, and yes, you're only mad because it's not Doug Bradley. And I'm like, it's the fourth actor to play the character. What are you on about? Oh, blah, 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 blah. It's the fourth actor. You know what I mean? We've already been through this. Is it Fat Pinhead? No, them are good. Oh, wait, it's a bland story. Nah, whatever. Do you know?
There you go.
There's the problem. It was a bland story that could have been told so much better. And the worst character was the hobo girl who was just not likable.
Yeah.
That, in my opinion, anyway. You know what I mean? So that just fell flat in his face. Wrong crowd. Nobody gives a shit. That's thing. So how do we recognize him? And we've already established that highly sensitive people are attracted. This is a catharsis. I think for us all, and most people I've talked to, is the same vein. We've also established the fact, irrefutably, that horror people aren't the characters. They either enjoy or create. In fact, more so the opposite. So that's a fallacy, and that has been debunked many times over. So where do we go next? That's, I suppose, the question, because we don't want this crap coming in, and we need to be more robust, I think, that we don't devolve into the nonsense. Now, obviously, the 12-year-old or the adult babies are always going to be like that, so you just don't respond to them. But how do the rest of us carry on having the adult conversation and not having our genre ruined?
So, just going off of what Andrew was saying, one of the dangers we're running right now in the horror genre is that those things that we've been talking about this whole time in other genres, they're slowly trying to tweak them in a way in which it now feels more natural when you do certain things. So now they're running out of reasons to complain in other genres. So then it's kind of leaving us within the horror genre kind of like at this huge beacon of black light that everybody's going like, oh, let's go over there and complain. So I think what we need to do is adding that extra layer of responsibility of checking, okay, is what I'm writing coming up as hateful, let's say, but not saying I'm gonna change my writing to fit what you expect. So one of the things that you mentioned in the list of questions that I don't know if I'm jumping ahead was
no,
about
it just fits
warnings.
in. It fits in. It's not that we're not that rigid here. That's
okay. So you were asking. One of the things you included there was talking about the warnings, like the content warnings. So for me, like, so I'm with Slashic Horror Press, and one of the authors that is also part of Slashic Horror Press is Chisto Healy, and he wrote this book called Two of a Kind, which I kind of describe as Dexter versus Buffalo Bill. It's something like that, and it's a really nasty, violent, gory book, and I love it. But if you read the content warning he put on his first page, I would kind of describe that as an anti-content warning. Like if you're a horror fan and you read that, you're like, oh, I want to read this. Because what he puts there, and paraphrasing, it's like, oh, if you don't like reading about dismemberment and people having their bodies peeled off and blah blah blah, this is not the book for you. If you don't like seeing queer people behaving as killers, this is not the book for you. If you don't like all kinds of people getting slaughtered, this is not the book for you. If it's and
so he's making a parody of it.
Yeah,
essentially,
it's an entire page of it, and I think for me that's the general that's the logical evolution of the content warning. I mean, and if I personally don't like putting content warnings, I mean, my book does have one very tiny in the little publisher part, but what I normally tell people is if there's something you find personally horrifying, it's possible you're going to find it in my book or in one of my future books. So just know it might be there. Enter at your own risk.
One thing that I do actually love the meta warning. That's almost like part of the story, and I think that is a lot of fun as a trigger warning. I've seen some really good, like there's one book, I can't remember which one it is offhand, where I think you get to one of the last chapters and it just says basically, do not read past here if you feel if you're worried about being upset about stuff and stuff like that. It's having fun with the right. It's making it a structural device.
Oh my God.
Let's take a prior example and think about something like Psycho for a moment, where a huge chunk of the story's effect revolves around substantial literary development that then culminates in a singular severe element of violence. Now, if you were to put a trigger warning about that, that plot element would very well possibly be ruined to a reader. So I actually have there's like a compromise solution that I am a big fan of, which is to have a note up front saying, if you're concerned about sensitivities, please see the back page of the book. And then the back page of the book gives a more clear and comprehensive list of content warnings, because I also do see the other side of the equation. I know a lot of folk, for example, who have absolutely no problem with death, dismemberment, some of the most brutal violence. You could have somebody being peeled, like, page by page by a potato peeler, and they're just like, yes, this is sweet. But because they were experienced some sort of childhood sexual violence, if they see that, it is going to break their experience. And that's the kind of thing, too, that for the readers of a book like that want to encounter those shocking, jarring moments, you can't have a trigger warning up front, because it's going to ruin the story. It's going to ruin the jarring elements. So, but I can definitely see why we might want to have something like that, and in earnest, at the back of the book, giving people the option, saying, hey, if you have specific triggers that that really are make or break, you can look here. Anyone else can just start at page 1 and read on forward. I think it's a solid compromise that does work for both parties, and helps minimize the room for error, I guess.
Yeah, because I find
if you look at for example, like my novel, the one I just released this year, The Local Truth. If you go to Goodreads, there are 21 reviews, out of which 20 are either a 5 or a 4 and really great reviews. There's just one bad review, and when I read it, I was like, I get it, I empathize, but damn, this shouldn't have resulted in a bad review, because what the person said was, oh, this book was going so great until I reached the part about the sexual assault. And I understand why that might be triggering to somebody. I did go through it, so I know how horrible it is. So I understand that, but that sometimes means that this person didn't actually take the time to understand where that came from, or why it's happening. Because if you read it in the book, it's not gratuitous. I'm not just putting it there for shock factor. The tagline of my whole book is, there are events that sour a place and turn it into a hole in the world. And I get to this event that is so horrible and so heinous that it puts into context everything else in the book. And no, that's not a spoiler, but if I get to that portion of the book and it triggers me to a point in which I'm like, I can't continue reading because this is awful, that's something about me. That's not something about the quality of the book. Because if you read what this person posted, they said, oh, it was going great, I was loving the writing until I got to this part. And then they give a 1-star review.
Is there an element of trolling? In fact, there's one of the questions, and this is come up. So how do you discern between a genuine person, highly sensitive person, and someone else chasing social media clout? Or can they be both? So is this somebody doing a notice me moment? Or is it genuinely affecting them? How do we tell the difference between the two? Because at the moment it's so difficult.
I've been thinking about it. thinking about it, and I'm thinking that highly sensitive people are not consciously aware of their own triggers, possibly. They don't have the self-awareness. They've had a traumatic experience. They haven't had probably any therapy. They might be carrying around baggage. We're easy pickings, really, because we bring out the darkness, and we bring out the sexual assaults, and we bring out the murders and the serial killers, and we bring that out. And that's because we enjoy writing about it, but there are a huge group of people who love to read that, so if I knew I was going to be triggered by something, I wouldn't read it. I wouldn't watch it. Why would I do that to myself? I've got enough self-awareness to know my triggers, and I'm not a psychiatrist. I'm a writer. I don't know what your traumas are. Just my box of horror. Don't read it. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, because it seems to be there's an obligation on the creator to fix everybody else's problems, which is impossible.
That's right.
You what is it? You can't please everybody all of the time. It's an impossible feat. But
yeah,
how do you know it's going to happen? All right, Andrew, no worries. Thanks very much for
you don't
joining
know
in.
if it's a highly.
Very cool. Yeah, thanks again, Andrew. Great to have you on board.
Bye.
Nice to meet you, Andrew.
Yep. But yeah, these people are doing it because they want to be seen. They want to be noticed. They want the attention, but they're not. They don't have the talent or the ability to actually create something worthwhile, or they don't have the. That's why I always bang on about it. Get a hobby, create. It doesn't have to be monetary value. You don't have to make a living out of it, but stop and try and create something to give yourself. Try different things to give yourself that bit of meaning or purpose, that you're not just going to a dead-end job, coming home, sitting in front of the screen, and then expecting others to fill your life for you. And this is something I've went on about ages, because I know the hole it can lead down to. And it's these sort of people that then turn to this sort of behavior. Oh, I'll give the 1-star review because I'm going to be, what's that word? Edgy. I'm going to be the edgelord of edginess, and show them, and then everyone will look at my name because I'm the only 1-star review. If everybody likes something, I'm going to say I hate it, blah, blah, blah. No, it goes on and on and on. And it's a compulsion, it's a set of compulsive behavior that it becomes addictive like anything else. And then the person can't get out of the cycle because that's the only thing giving their life meaning, and they know nothing else. The problem is it's antagonistic. It gets people's backs up, and then where there should be harmony or like disagreement of, polite disagreement. Oh, you like that thing. Wasn't for me. Fair enough. Glad you enjoyed it. It becomes you're a terrible person because you like that or didn't like it. It just gets stupid. How do we start recognizing that? How do we start recognizing that?
I think if you have to get to a point in which you need to figure out whether the person is sincerely triggered by this or not, I would err on the side of believing them. But if you see that there's a trend of this person going around book by book, just kind of giving bad reviews over, things that they feel triggered for, then at that point you can kind of go like, maybe this is just a
how
call for
easy
attention.
Is that to track though?
I mean, I don't do it because I don't think it's necessary. Just the same way as one of the biggest recommendations you can give any author is do not respond to bad reviews. That's just the stupidest thing you can do, and it leads nowhere. So just the same as I would advise not to do that, I would advise people to just not, how would I say, not to track that, because it's pointless. You just do your thing and let them do theirs. But at least if
it's leading now to something.
That...
Here's the thing though, that's fine and well, but it's now leading to people always find clusters now, and it's easier now on the internet. And now they're getting organized, and now we're getting to this point of, oh, horror needs to change. Oh, we need to change all these words. We need to change all these things, and that's where we're going down that path. So how do we need to do something? That's why I'm saying we need to be more robust.
Yeah.
Or we're going to lose our franchise.
I think what I'm finding, I'm finding that in horror, people are getting a little bit up in arms about mental illness in the horror genre, which, okay, I understand. It's because, you know, mental illness has a stigma and marginalizing people, and I think there's something that's occurring now where people are just saying, oh, well, you know, you're using too many. Well, if you have anything in there that has to do with mental illness, we are not going to review your book. We're not going to read it. Or we might read it, or we might not, but we're not going to review it. We're not going to promote it. We don't want you to share it onto our groups because you've got somebody who's got a mental illness in your story, or you've used the word "that's crazy," or, you know, those double meaning words that don't necessarily apply to a person with mental illness, but could apply to just a normal person acting crazy.
Legitimate words, legitimate language,
yeah,
grown-up language where you have, you know, you have to look at the context of what's being said.
It's like when you say, "Oh, I'm going to kill you."
Right.
It doesn't mean that you're going to kill somebody. It's just like, "Oh, you."
Yeah, by
moron.
vocalizing that you're not going to do it. You know what I mean? If you're going to do it, you're not going to vocalize. You're just going to, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think Dell is right. I think it's become this thing in which, as I was saying, people are becoming a little bit lazy. They don't read the context of what's going on. They just have words or concepts that they don't want to see in the book. So I personally don't think as horror authors we should be changing what we're doing. Yes, we do need to be a little bit more careful. That's the environment where we are, but it doesn't mean that we need to just bulk out all of these requests. Why? Because for example, if I have so I know that you guys are from Europe, so for you guys, I think the C word is kind of like a very common thing to use, but here in the Americas, it's not. People get really mad at you using the C word, but so if in the narration of my book I use the C word, okay, fine, get mad, because the narrator most of the times is me writing from the perspective of a character. But if a character in their dialogue they use that, is because that character would use that word. You know, and I'm not going to censor my I'm not going to censor my character.
Yeah, half of Stephen King's bibliography should be taken off the shelves.
Sorry?
If that was the case, though, these words, half of Stephen King's bibliography, half of his work should be taken off the shelves. But because he says the right thing on Twitter, it's okay.
Loads of books.
You know what I mean? It's a form of, I genuinely believe it's a form of bullying. It's just come under a new umbrella. Most people, like I said,
people are getting it. They're getting it mixed up. They're so getting it mixed up. There's a difference between mental illness and psychopathy and sociopathic traits. They're completely different.
It's a dangerous aspect.
I mean, you know, the traits might be similar, perhaps, but they're not. A diagnosed mental illness it's not the same as having a narcissistic personality. You know what I mean?
I honestly believe a lot of these people do have that condition. Real. I do believe a lot of these people that are using, like, I hate it. There's people there that use mental illness as social media clout. They think, and everyone's looking for this badge to use as a shield. Nothing. I don't have to act reasonably in the real world. I can do whatever I want because I've got this special thing. Tick whatever box it might be. It's a form of narcissism. You know, it is actually psychopath. You know, it's a dangerous. They mightn't be chopping people up and hiding them in basements, but they're exercising it through another way, and they're still causing harm. And that's when what might be either a personality trait or a mental illness becomes a pathology, that it's actually dangerous. When you're causing harm to others and actively going out of your way, that's where we need to recognize the difference, and where we can push back against it. Because if we don't, we've seen how it devolves everywhere else. We don't want to hear. And I don't want this conformist nonsense either, that if you're not this, this, and this, you can't be part, because that's never been horror. Horror has always been the weirdos, and I embrace being a weirdo. You know, I could never fit in anywhere until I started getting into horror, and I started getting into, I love metal, I love different, you know what I mean? That was where not everyone looked like me or acted like me, because everyone's life's different. But I found my tribe, if that makes sense. And the tribe is so loose and so vast ranging that other, like, romance people are, you can tell them, you know what I mean, they're out of the factory. Comedy people are all the same, you know what I mean, they're pretty much standard. The ones that just sit and watch daytime TV, you can spot the people a mile off. They're all the same people. A horror fan, you can't. There's some that try to make it that way, and that's the people you need to push back against. But 9 times out of 10, you see me walking down the city in a suit, you don't know. Because you need to actually talk to someone to get to know what they're about, to find a commonality. And that's what I love about this genre. These sort of people, just, they're not here to do good. And they're using the veneer of doing good, I believe,
they're
anyway.
Dangerous.
And they're actually dangerous, yeah.
They're dangerous. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's positivity in the sense of saying, hey, maybe we want to be a little bit more responsible, but it should never turn into, I get to tell you how to write your book. I get to tell you what you can and can't write. No, I mean, and you mentioned a very good example, Stephen King. Like, more than half his books would probably be banned if some of the things that people want to get out of horror, you know, were actually taken out of horror. And it's not that. I mean, it's just, you need to understand that just because it is in a work of fiction, it doesn't mean that the author writing it approves of these things. I mean, I'm writing things that scare me. I'm writing things that have traumatized me in my life, and I'm trying to exercise those things through my writing. So, if the moment that you tell me, the moment that me as a sexual assault victim, the moment that you tell me you can't write sexual assault into one of your books, what you're doing is you're limiting me as a survivor of that, of exercising that, of putting that on a page. You're censoring me from expressing something that was traumatizing for me. So I do not believe there should be censorship for horror, because the very genre itself, horror, tells you what you're going to read here are things you're not going to enjoy. They're horrifying things. So I don't think that's right.
You did right.
Mm-hmm. So
I mean, we place of, you know, sometimes we write from our own experiences, and that's cathartic in itself, you know, because I have a mental illness. Sometimes I write, you know, stories with people who have a mental illness, and I can delve right into that character because I've been there. I know I still have it. I know what it's like to not want to get up every day, you know. Why can't I express myself as a mental health recovery? I'm in recovery. Why can't I express myself, you know? Why are you going to take that away from me? That's just, I think that's just really narcissistic, really, at the end of the day. Who's the narcissist here? Is it them or is it us? You know, it's not us.
I don't believe, because if we were that way, we wouldn't be having this conversation. What they're doing is
damaging.
If we were that way inclined, we would not want to have this conversation, and we wouldn't take on other viewpoints.
That's right.
Do you know what I mean? You wouldn't open yourself up to it. And do you know how many people obviously invited on this? There's umpteen number of opportunities for disagreement. You know what I mean? You don't do that if you're afraid to have a position challenged. You don't do it live as well. Oh, by the way, thanks everybody. I know I haven't been putting up your comments, but thanks everybody on Twitch and YouTube. You've been fantastic.
So, one of the things I think is maybe again, don't quote me on this, but maybe the solution is something similar to what people who write fantasy did. That you have dark fantasy, which You can go the George R. Martin way and just balls out.
Never finish anything.
Huh?
Never finish anything and bounce naked on your trampoline. That's
don't
good.
Even remind me that still hurts. But you can have that, and then you can have like your regular fantasy, like let's say your Tolkien or your other fantasy books that come out right now that can be a little bit saucy at times too. Well, Tolkien isn't saucy. That was a bad example. Or you can have your mid-grade fantasy, which is where people can read something that is fantasy but without all the dark trappings. Maybe that's a thing that can happen in horror, and somebody can be an author that says, "Oh, I'm a mid-grade horror author," so that way the person knows that what they're going to read is something like Goosebumps or something like not going way too far, something like that. That they're just going to have scares, but just plenty. That way, somebody who is very sensitive can say like, okay, so I'm going to stick to this because I know if I go into the deep water and I go into extreme horror, I'm going to probably read stuff.
You've watched some of these episodes before, haven't you? We've always talked about the baby pool, the shallow end, the deep end, the diving pool in horror.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
But that was actually one of the questions I put up.
I like that, and yeah.
Yeah, I've mentioned it before. It's you can make paddle about, then you're going to swim out a bit, and then at some stage you're going to end up on that diving board. It's up to you whether you're going to like jump right in.
Yeah.
But every country has their own like age rating systems for movies, for example, and they do it now for games. You know what I mean?
I will not watch anything unless it's an R18. I will not watch anything unless it's an R18 now, or an R16 at the slightly. But if it's an R13, no.
Yeah, but that's the thing.
I'm not going to get the satisfaction.
Yeah, is that useful? If the book has... And the question is then, who decides? Because the last thing we want are a bunch of people in a corporate room deciding.
There.
Because then everything just becomes...
Well, that's who's deciding it.
Yeah, and that's the problem as well.
That's who's deciding it.
Yeah, I think it needs to be decided by the author, not a rating system that's provided.
But I mean,
by
for warning
executive.
Yeah,
because the problem is that if it's done by an executive or by the publishing house or anything like that, it becomes like what happens with the movies. Like you can have the most amazing movie in the world, but because you're showing a frontal nude of a penis, then all of a sudden you get an X rating, and because of that, your movie doesn't get wide distribution. And
does A24 get X ratings?
Yeah, they
A24
do exist.
They love serving portions of meat and two veg.
Yep. That there's always that double standard, But
no, but that's what I was just wondering. A20 are most of their films on 18.
Hey, American Psycho is in a cling wrap with a warning on it, and you have to show ID to go and buy the book. So,
I know.
Of course you're going to buy the book, aren't you?
Yeah, but I mean, because most of the movies I watched when I was a kid, or most of the books I read, they were not stuff that I was supposed to be.
Yeah, most of us. That's actually another conversation we're thinking of having sometime.
Yeah, but it can hurt your chances. For example, if you're an author that's looking to get, let's say, traditionally published, or trying to find a publishing house, they might say, "Oh, we're not touching this book because the rating would be too high, and we can't sell it as much."
Thing is,
it's the way an executive would look at it.
There's already genres, there's already subgenres in horror. There's dark fantasy, there's splatterpunk, there's paranormal, there's true crime. It gives you an idea. One of the things that really makes me laugh is this trend going around of extreme horror, and everything now is an extreme horror book, and then you're like, really? Dick. You're like, really? So you have bad faith actors, but people trying to dress something up as extreme, and it's just the word, once it gets bandied about too much, loses its meaning.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, I personally, I wouldn't like to have a rating system. I think it's something that can be done through subgenres, and it's something that can be defined by the author themselves. I I don't think having a rating system for books is the way to go. I think just by the genre itself, you can tell, or you should be able to tell what you're getting.
Question is, do highly sensitive people not have friends?
They do.
They have.
Do they have friends that maybe have the same interests?
Well, that's a tough question. I don't know.
Is that normally the basis of friendship?
I mean,
so
I really wouldn't be able to answer.
Where I'm going with this, would you have a friend who's a fellow horror fan who might, you know, if you're worried about certain things, ask the friend who's read or watched the thing, going, would that be for me? And they go, no, mate, that's not for you, but this one is. Does that not exist in the world anymore?
I've got highly sensitive friends.
Right.
I've got highly sensitive friends. I really, really do. They will not touch. They won't even read my work.
They won't even turn up to our reviews.
They refuse to read it.
Now that you mentioned,
they don't turn up to. They don't turn up to the reviews. No.
Because they're like, oh, I'm not touching that. Some of the stuff we have covered.
Yeah. No. Now that you mentioned,
they don't want to hear what we're talking about. Yeah.
I mean, I do have friends that are exactly like that.
Right.
That they go like, you know what? If it scares a 5-year-old, I'm not touching it. That was an actual phrase from a friend of mine. She said, like, if it scares a 5-year-old, I'm not touching it.
But once again, is that not part of the grown-up conversation?
Yeah.
So they come and ask you, oh, would I be annoyed by this? And you're like, yeah, you would be.
But that's what I'm...
That's why, as we're determined, that's why people don't ask me. Because I'm like, yeah, that's fine. And Dale's like, what are you talking about, you lunatic?
Yeah, no. Oh, no, seriously. Oh, yeah, no. The highly sensitive people that I know would definitely stay away from any discussion, even a debate. I can't even get them to see my side. They can't see my perspective at all. Why would you like to see somebody cut up and dismembered and put in a freezer? Why the hell would you like to see a demon come down and possess somebody? And it's like, well, because that's what I enjoy. And you know, that's where the debate gets the debate drops with them, because I want to keep going, but they just no. I've got a friend who has said to me, I choose ignorance is bliss. She doesn't want to know anything about it.
And that's perfectly reasonable. If somebody doesn't like something,
but she's having the conversation. That's the point. She's having the conversation with you. She's not jumped. You know, she's not jumping into the pool.
Yeah, and that's the difference. We don't have an obligation to try and convert everybody into a horror fan either. Actually, that's I'll keep that for a minute because it's my final question, so we'll leave that for the minute. But we don't have to. We're not a religion. We're not converting people. All we're doing is explaining our point. Yeah, we don't do this in real life. As long as people understand that, it's a thrill, like going on a roller coaster. Mightn't be your thing. I'm not going to go into your genre and tell you not to do this, that, and the other. If it doesn't interest me, I just browse on past and don't waste my time. There's plenty of things I can do in my life to fulfill it. But at the same token, you don't tell me, or you don't try and destroy what I enjoy. That's where I have a problem.
Yep.
If you're actively trying to dismantle something that I enjoy, and what's worse is if you're doing it through hatred, like just pure hatred. I hate horror fans. I hate you. I think you're scum. You should all die. Fair enough. At least I recognize the enemy. What really aggravates me is using the veneer of niceness. Oh, we are protecting people and blah, 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 blah. I know. And it's not really. It's just hiding the nastiness underneath. And I have no time for that whatsoever. I really don't. If you hit my guts, come up, step up. We'll have a go at it. No bother. You win, you win. At least I recognize an enemy, and there can be mutual respect between enemies. It's been done in the battlefield since the dawn of time.
Human beings always try to find a way to feel at least a little superior to other human beings, and they try to spot which are the traits that make them just slightly superior to this other person. So when they see that you enjoy something like horror, you know, with all of its darkness and blood and murder and all of that, they feel like, oh, this person is not as moral as I am, or this person is not as psychologically sound as I am. So I am a little bit superior. So I get to criticize them, and that shouldn't be. I think just like your friend is doing, Dale. I mean, I think that the whole thing is about talking about it, conversing about it. Like I have this friend. She when I started posting about my book and all of that, she's an old high school friend of mine, and she came and asked me, "Hey, I have an 8-year-old kid, and he loves reading horror. Would he be able to read your book?" My first instinct, knowing some of the stuff that happens in the later part of my book, I'm like, no. But what I did instead was I asked her, so what type of horror does he read?
Mm-hmm.
And she's like, oh, he loves Stephen King. Okay, what Stephen King books has he read? Oh, he's read this one and this one and this one. I'm like, okay, then I think he should be okay. Because there's that conversation. But what other people would do, I mean, if this friend of mine had been like people who don't want to have the conversation, what she would have done is, oh, Carlos wrote a horror book. I'm going to buy it for my kid who likes horror. And then the kid reads it, or she reads it and goes like, oh my God, there's this really violent scene, or there's this horrifying sexual assault scene. How dare you put that in my kid's hands? And I'm like, did you ask me?
Did you kick down her front door and be like, here?
Yeah.
That's read the book.
No, but just the
open
fact
up, write the page in your face. I'll read it. Sneak into their bedroom at night, and like,
yeah, you're right.
That doesn't happen.
Allow me to come into your home and corrupt your children.
No,
but she had the conversation with me, and I really appreciate that.
That's
Why
good.
don't people do that?
That's good.
But this is in a normal sane world, that's the way forward. Just have a conversation. And do you know what? If I'm never going to try and convince somebody I'm a weirdo. I'm never going to convince anybody to like what I like. I like different things as well. Like, even this channel, when I'm doing the role playing stuff, most of you are like, "Oh, you're a nerd." That's fair enough. People wonder as well why I'm. Yeah, and people are wondering why I would spend my time on YouTube for a start. Doing these sort of things. What you spend your time doing that for? Well, what would you rather do? It's like each their own. I don't appreciate some things other folks do, but crack on. That's what makes you happy. It's this. Yeah. Like I said, this need to tear down and destroy, and it's usually by people that don't create. That's why we need more creators, not less. That's always a mantra of this channel.
Yes.
The more people create, the more you get to twist those cogs, the more you get to challenge yourself. And once again, it doesn't have to be for monetary value. It doesn't have to be a living. It's just stretching yourself. And you're amazed how much better quality of life, even if it's finger painting, so be it. You're stretching yourself. And that's, I think there's this lack, especially in the digital age, of people actually creating now. They rely, I see it with kids as well, they're just on the tablet thing. They're not drawing, they can barely you can see the motor skills, can barely hold a pen.
Yeah.
And they're not using their brains.
They're not.
I keep telling my children that TikTok is destroying their brain cells. Yep.
I won't even
scroll down
go on that platform. No interest.
No.
Although at the same time, there's folks on there, like they do the dopey dance things.
I'm on TikTok. I mean, it's actually been really helpful to promote my book, but I make sure to target my content to people who read, or people who like books, or people who like horror. You're probably not going to see me do any dance challenge anytime soon.
No, but I think they're silly, the dance ones and all, but at the same time, there's somebody spend their time learning to choreograph a move. They're practicing, they're keeping fit, they're learning to set up equipment, and they're actually physically doing something. So I'm never going to say, don't do that.
Those are
because they're spending time and effort and creativity. It doesn't just mean horror-based. So similarly, they don't have the right to tell me. And that's just where I stand with everything. We've kind of covered this, but at what stage would you consider a horror piece sanitized to the point that it's no longer part of the genre? At what point does it get chipped away that it actually stops being the thing that it intended? what are the core elements, I suppose? Like, we know violence is part of it, that's... but not all horror stories have violence.
Imagery, wouldn't you say? Imagery, I would say, is one of those elements. Yeah.
I think when you do a cutaway before every single violent scene, which I guess it's fine if what you're writing is very mid-grade horror, but when you shy away from showing anything in the book, to put it that way, also there's this thing about horror, and it's for me the most important thing, which is your characters, at least in the beginning or through most of the book, don't have control, right? They don't have power over what's happening. They eventually need to find a way to deal with what's happening. But most of the book, they don't have control or power over it. If your book tries to just give too much power to your characters within a horrible situation to the point in which it's not a threat or it doesn't generate tension, it's, for me, that's what I would consider negative empowerment, I guess, because you're killing tension, you're killing horror by empowering your character too much instead of letting them figure things out until they find a way out.
And that's the classic hero's journey anyway.
There you go. Exactly.
The hero comes up against an antagonist, fails, tries to find a way to become more powerful, grows in themselves, refaces the antagonism, wins. That's the story that's been told since the end of time. And like Andrew brought up earlier, you've got these people who are just not good writers. They don't understand that basic concept. They're hacks, they're grifters, and they're using this all as a veneer. And I think we just gotta be wary, and just understand, I think, where these folks are coming from. So just to wrap this up, final question. Is horror for everyone?
No.
Who wants to start that one? Who is horror not for then?
No, it's not.
It's not.
Highly sensitive people.
But we debunked that.
It might be for highly sensitive people as long as they're aware of what they're getting into. It's not for everyone.
Not aware.
It's not for everyone, and it's just like no genre is for everyone. I have read romance books that I have liked, but I personally don't like romance as a genre that I would read. It's totally valid for the people that do. It's not my cup of tea. But I think it's the same as horror. It's not for everyone. It's okay for everyone to try it. It's open, and we want more people to try it. But it's
at least
not
lose the stigmatism.
Yeah, exactly. Don't. People should stop looking at it as only psychos like horror. No, everybody should at least
do horror.
Try. Maybe.
It's
well, we all know that as horror's on a spectrum, right? So I would possibly introduce, say, The Others, a ghost story to slightly bring them in. So The Others, I use that as a prime example. Sixth Sense, that's another one as well. That's a really good start off into the horror genre, because that's a sub-genre, kind of, on this lightest. I don't understand this extreme horror thing that's going around. As far as I'm concerned, Peter Jackson did all that back in the freaking 80s. So, that's extreme horror. So that's what I would say about that. And the other thing is that horror isn't just extreme, and it's not just all graphic. There's so many different elements. There's a cinematography that hasn't been done before in other genres. I'll bring up Blair Witch Project again. That was one of the first types of that type of documentary style cinematography going on, and that was horror that introduced that, right?
Yeah. It was nobody else introduced special effects.
So, exactly.
It
is horror. You're right.
We had our copyright claim removed off our live A Werewolf in London review. So if you want to go and watch that 41-year-old clip where you see the Oscars giving the award through gritted teeth to a horror movie, and then what they showed of other genres that compare the American Werewolf and horror, that's just absolutely laughable. So if you want to go and check that out, that's popped back up on the channel, and you can watch the unedited version now that that copyright claim removed.
I mean, John Carpenter's The Thing. I mean, it's
great.
It's impressive. I mean,
I love dogs. I hate to see something happen to a dog. And what's the first flipping character to go?
I can't handle it.
Sorry? What?
I think she's saying she can't handle it.
Killed off the dog.
Yeah, and it wasn't just one dog, it was a whole kennel full. And it was like, oh, God, no.
Oh, God, no.
And I still love that movie. I still love that movie. And still, at that stage, I turn away.
Yeah.
I legit.
By the way, I love Dell's suggestion of The Others as a, how would I say, like as an entry point movie for people who might be sensitive to it, because there's no blood. There's just atmosphere all over the place. There are jump scares, but very well done jump scares. And
Steve and I covered that. Steve, Chris, and I actually covered that.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, it's just a very moody, atmospheric movie, and it has a good payoff at the end.
And the most horrifying thing is Nicole Kidman's overacted.
It does.
Well, but I mean, oh God, I'm going to say something that's going to get me in trouble. But I would rather her acting being scary more than her face recently. She kind of ruined the Northman for me. Not because of her acting. Her acting was good.
I
but
don't know
it was like, wow,
those all Madonna on us. Oh God, there's a horror. You know, hold on. How can you say you're afraid of horror and you watch music TV awards with Madonna appearing recently?
Yeah,
I know I'm an evil person.
What a joke!
Yeah. What's going on with Madonna? But yeah, no, I think if anybody wants to be introduced to horror, I mean, I think we have enough knowledge of the genre when it comes to books and when it comes to movies to say, like, hey, try this and see what you feel.
Just don't ask me.
Oh no, you
don't ask me, because I just say,
don't ask Colin.
I just go, that's perfectly fine.
Yeah.
And there's something not right up here, because honestly, I'm just like, that's perfectly fine. You'll be all right. And somebody comes back to me absolutely traumatized, going, what the hell was that I watched?
Yeah, you go like, here, I recommend this book, and the person goes like, what does womb mean?
Yeah.
Fun times. So here's the simple solution: have a conversation, speak to a horror fan, make friends, get to know them, and then if they give you a recommendation that you get, then you know that's a sort of trusted source. There you go, easy, problem solved. Don't go in and go me, because that doesn't get you anywhere. It just gets our backs up.
No.
And we have good imaginations, so
Yep.
And you will see that.
Yep.
You will see that if you approach a fandom of any genre with respect and you ask questions, people are more than eager to answer them for you. And people are more than eager to guide you, because we do want to have more fans within the horror genre. So we are eager to answer the questions, but ask them. Don't just come in like, oh, I watched this and it was violent and crap. You know? No.
Yeah. Have adult discourse. Don't be antagonistic, you know, and a little bit of respect and understanding, and we'll all be fine. Carlos, Dale, and of course Andrew, who was on earlier, thank you very much for coming on. This has been a fascinating debate. Great to go through the meat and bones, and hopefully those that maybe have prepositions about horror, you come in and watch us, you might get some ideas. As always, leave a comment in the chat if you come in afterwards. Any questions or thoughts, sure, we can have a talk about it. As always, be respectful. We have plenty coming up. As always, tomorrow Cameron and I are on for the talk spot. Yeah, we're a week early because of stuff, but we'll do the month's horror roundup. Dale and I are on next week, I think. We're doing Heavenly Creatures.
Yeah.
Maybe Carlos will get you roped in. Now you've had a wee taste of the coming on live. We'll get you back on and have a laugh. But
I can't next week, but I would love to be on any other time.
Oh, yeah,
let's just be in touch.
Yeah,
and,
keep up to date.
I would love to. It's
more
been
than
really
welcome
fun.
back. It's been a laugh.
Thank you so much.
Everyone out there tuned in, thank you very much. Thanks for your support as always. And as always, keep up to date with the channel, do the typey clicky things. And until next time, keep it creepy, keep it horrific.